Moving on to episode 2, now the priestess girl and the youth are starting their mission in the construction area. They are also accompanied by Goblin Slayer and the others. Initially, the youth is excited to go and kill goblins. However, the priestess girl explains that they must gather information from the client first. Coincidentally, their client is a dwarf, just like the one in Goblin Slayer's group. The client begins to explain. There was a party that recently gained fame by taking on this mission, but they never returned. The client complains that their equipment for building was stolen by goblins. For now, that's all there is to it, but the client is worried that the goblins might start attacking the workers. Up until that point, Goblin Slayer had been the only one asking for information. The elf reminds them that this time, it's the priestess girl's turn to act as the leader. Goblin Slayer understands, but it's a different story if the situation becomes an emergency. Then, the priestess girl also starts asking questions. She wants to know which area the goblins inhabit. Some time ago, the client got angry and chased the goblins who had stolen his equipment. The place is north of here, and the client also has a map of that area. Goblin Slayer suspects that the goblins live in a mausoleum, a tomb consisting of corridors and burial chambers. When he was a child, Goblin Slayer was forbidden to approach the mausoleum. The priestess girl asks if there is anything unusual at the entrance of the tomb, like bones or symbols. The client can't remember anything like that. If there's no totem, it means there's no shaman. The priestess girl also wants to know the characteristics and ranks of the adventurers who previously took on this mission. As far as the client remembers, they had ceramic and obsidian ranks. They were composed of lizardmen, knights, priest-knights, wizards, priests, and scouts. There were 2 girls in the party. Fortunately, there were only 2 women, but it's certain that they were slaughtered. Because there is no totem, there may be creatures other than goblins commanding them. As the youth watches the others contemplate their plan based on the information, the elf remains silent, doing nothing. The youth wonders why the elf is just sitting there. She says they each have their own tasks. The elf's task is to scout and assist from a distance. After that, they arrive in front of the mausoleum that was discussed. After seeing its shape, the elf understands that the mausoleum could attract children to play inside. The youth urges them to enter quickly because there may be other adventurers who are currently being held captive. When she hears this, the priestess girl is reminded of her previous party, who also said the same thing. Before entering, the lizardman asks the priestess girl what formation they should use. Since there are 6 of them, the priestess girl suggests splitting into 2 teams, each with 3 people. Then, there's one more thing to do. With a smile on her face, the priestess girl and the elf tell the youth that they need to mask their scent with blood. Both of them seem to want revenge because they were forced to do the same by Goblin Slayer. Their first encounter with goblins involved a total of 5 of them in the corridor. The youth was eager to chant a fire spell there, but fortunately, the priestess girl managed to stop him in time. After defeating a few more enemies, the youth started protesting because their progress was too slow. However, the priestess girl emphasized that if each room wasn't cleared, there could be danger. Despite that, the youth still wanted to move quickly because someone was trapped. In one of the rooms, they noticed signs of a trap on its door. They had the option to take a different path. Luckily, the other goblins were still unaware of their presence. Suddenly, the youth became even more frustrated because they were overthinking things. He impulsively opened the door. The youth didn't believe there would be a trap in a place also inhabited by goblins. Upon opening the door, a human body part fell from it, shocking the youth, and the situation became dangerous. The youth's scream could potentially act as an alarm for the other goblins. Suddenly, they heard a woman's voice screaming in pain not far away. Despite not having learned his lesson, the youth ran towards the source of the sound on his own. When he arrived, the youth found a woman who had been tortured in a chair, with a goblin next to her. The youth panicked at the sight and immediately chanted a fire spell at the goblin. He did manage to eliminate the goblin, but the youth didn't realize that there was another figure behind. There was a troll and a group of other goblins in the room. Fortunately, Goblin Slayer and the others had time to save the youth. The woman who had been tortured by the goblin was still alive. More goblins were emerging from inside. The elf asked the priestess girl to give orders, but the priestess girl felt panicked and couldn't think clearly. In such a situation, whether she liked it or not, Goblin Slayer had to take command. He immediately ordered the priestess girl to use holy light. They would break through while the goblins were exposed to the light. Meanwhile, Goblin Slayer would deal with the troll. As instructed, the priestess girl used holy light. While the others managed to escape, it was now Goblin Slayer's turn to eliminate the troll. He threw a bottle of gasoline into the troll's face. After that, he also threw a torch at its face to set it on fire. Then, Goblin Slayer joined the elf in their escape. The priestess girl, lizard man, dwarf, the youth, and the rescued girl managed to run ahead. They stopped to rest for a moment while waiting for Goblin Slayer and the elf. When the youth saw the priestess girl fighting so hard at this moment, he recalled his past mocking of her. He felt guilty for his words. Meanwhile, Goblin Slayer and the elf were still being pursued by the troll. It seemed that the fire from earlier wasn't enough to kill it. Shortly after that, they caught up to where the priestess girl and the others were. Before the troll arrived, Goblin Slayer asked if anyone could use a water spell. The dwarf had a rain spell, but it was somewhat weak since they were indoors. Goblin Slayer also asked the priestess girl to use Holy Light once again when the troll appeared. The priestess girl used Holy Light once more, followed by the dwarf's rain spell. After that, Goblin Slayer threw a potion at the troll's head. Suddenly, its body began to freeze from the face. Goblin Slayer had learned that a stone cooled after being heated would crack. The potion he had just thrown absorbed the water and heat from the troll's face, accelerating the cooling process. By the way, he learned this from an ice cream vendor in Water Town. Next, Goblin Slayer continued to kill all the goblins in the area. The youth felt guilty because this chaos had occurred due to his carelessness. However, he still refused to acknowledge Goblin Slayer. He faced the troll casually but became very serious when it came to killing goblins. The mission is now complete, and they are all celebrating it in the guild. As usual, the lizardman orders a menu that includes cheese. Goblin Slayer once again remains silent during these festive moments. Meanwhile, the priestess girl is still feeling down because of her failure in leading the mission. The elf tries to console her, saying that no one can suddenly become a perfect leader. The red-haired youth, for some reason, seems dissatisfied. According to the lizard man, the youth should be happy because he safely returned from his first adventure. Moreover, encountering a troll in his first adventure is a rare occurrence. However, the youth daydreams about facing goblins alone if there were no troll. By the way, the elf is curious about the rescued female adventurer. The priestess girl informs her that the woman has been treated and will consider her next course of action after she is fully recovered. Though it may sound strange, the elf agrees that there is still a chance as long as one is alive. Suddenly, the youth remarks that life itself has lost its meaning. The woman has lost to goblins, so the youth believes she will be ridiculed, just like his own sister. His sister lost to goblins and was killed by them. Goblin Slayer just found out that the youth has a sister. The youth hopes that his sister is still alive and did not die from goblin dagger poison. Hearing the youth's story, the priestess girl suddenly recalls something. The youth's face and red hair resemble the witch in her old party. This means that it's likely his sister was a victim of the goblin mission their party took on before. The youth greatly admires his sister, so he doesn't accept it when people around him make fun of her just because she lost to goblins. After going on a drunken rampage, the youth falls asleep. At that moment, for some reason, Goblin Slayer decides to head home early. Before leaving, he leaves money and asks the others to rent an inn for the youth. The priestess girl, of course, becomes concerned about Goblin Slayer. However, he tells her to just rest and acts indifferent when the elf asks about tomorrow's mission. Right outside the guild, Goblin Slayer crosses paths with the spearman and his fellow witch. As usual, the spearman starts a small argument with Goblin Slayer. However, he senses something unusual about Goblin Slayer, who is lost in thought. Goblin Slayer also remains indifferent when the spearman expresses concern for him. It turns out that Goblin Slayer doesn't go straight back to the farm. He lingers in an alley and takes off his helmet. Upon hearing the youth's story, Goblin Slayer is reminded of a similar situation that happened to his own sister. He believes that everything he has done so far has not made any difference.